Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Federation of the Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us on this sunny August afternoon. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and CEO of Telescope Film, which is a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are delighted to be collaborating with AFUSA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here is a quick video about them. So we'll put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat in just a moment. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. Next month, we'll be talking about the Belgian film Playground, directed by Laura Wandel. It's a back-to-school story that we selected in the spirit of the rentrée. But before we get started today, just a couple of brief housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, please raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of your screen. It's in the reactions section, or you can always put your question in the chat. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I'd like to introduce our new facilitator. In case you weren't with us last month, Peter Debruge is the chief film critic for Variety, where he has worked since 2005. He has also written for Premiere, Life, Creative Screenwriting, IndieWire, and the Miami Herald. In 2017, he co-founded the Animation is Film Festival in Los Angeles and has also been a member of juries at the South by Southwest, Reykjavik, Moludist, Cocoa, Annecy, and Cannes film festivals. So bienvenue, Peter. And with that, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure I'm unmuted. Is that right? Good. Welcome, everybody. We hope that, here, let me put myself a little bit better on camera, but we hope that everybody enjoyed this movie. We really wanted something that would be a fresh breath of air here at the end of the summer. We're all melting away in our corners of record heat waves and all of that. So a sizzling French coming-of-age story was just, I hope, what the doctor ordered. This movie, of course, comes from the director François Ozon. He's a gay director who wanted to start his career by making this movie. The book Dance on My Grave was published in 1982. He read it in 1985 and always felt that this was the story that if he could grow up to be a film director, he wanted to start his career with. It was a little bit more complicated than that because the book is an English language British novel that had interest from other directors, and it's kind of been passing through various hands over the years, never got made. Ozon, of course, had quite a successful launch to his career as it was, kind of going through. We hope you also treated yourself to the short film, A Summer Dress, which if you watch them both, I think you'll see how the two movies kind of rhyme and echo one another. But that was the first of several, or one of several shorts that he did early on before he started making features. And eventually he managed to get the rights to this story. He transposed it to France. He had considered making it in southern England where it's set. If you see a tail, that's a cameo from my cat who may be popping up at various points. I don't want to distract everybody, but who doesn't love that? In any case, he transposed it to from the south of England to France, Normandy, which is kind of as close as you can get with just a channel of water in between you, and in a language where he felt comfortable directing the actors. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context. One other thing I can maybe say about the film that's very important is this movie, which I think would have made quite the splash had it come out as normal, fell into the unlucky kind of window of the 2000 Cannes Film Festival, which was a really strong edition that was canceled by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that year, Cannes shared with the public what films had been selected, so as they could kind of have the benefit in their publicity and whatnot. But this film proceeded with basically just the nominal release you could have under those kind of lockdown pressures. And so the movie did come out in the summer of 2000, and yet it didn't benefit from an in-person premiere in Cannes. And I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna have to get used to this. Sorry. But I think that if you haven't heard of the film, it's likely because it kind of fell between the cracks there. And Ozon was a very prolific, very respected director. Probably half of his films have premiered in Cannes. He's kind of moved from movies like this, which are very free and light and sexy and sensual, to more serious topics like assisted suicide and sort of scandals in the Catholic Church, and it's been. I think of him a little bit like the French Pedro Almodovar, and that both started out doing the kind of more playful, sexy queer films and have increasingly stretched and tested their abilities with more serious work. And we're always really gratified when they come back around and do make movies like they were when they started, which is what this is. So that's as much as I want to kind of monologue. I'd like to jump into a discussion with all of you. Now, I'm on my phone today and I can't necessarily see how many people we have. I might need some help in terms of kind of coordinating the conversation. The way we usually do this is we invite you to just raise your hand, either on screen, or you can do it with the kind of raise your hand flag on your Zoom window to let us know that you'd like to talk. And then, of course, remember when you're called on to unmute so that we can all hear you. That's always the trick. But now maybe what we can do is just kind of like take a look. I'd be curious how many of you have seen work by François Ozon before. So here, when I ask you to raise your hand, it's not to speak, but just to kind of gauge the room. Was this your introduction to the filmmaker, or if you've seen work of his before, just show me your hand. I just want to kind of scroll through here. So if you know the work of Ozon elsewhere, I just know how I'm not seeing any hands. Well, in that case, I feel like this may have been kind of a saucy introduction, because it's this was the kind of movie that Ozon was making when he was younger, and it's kind of a return to form. Let's see. What we want to do is kind of turn this into a conversation. So what I'd kind of like to know is how it made people feel. I see a lot of women watch this time, and one of the things that I think that was important to Ozon and to the author of the novel is that even though it was about gay characters, it's meant to be very universal. And the relationship, the dynamic between David and Alex is one that you can see play out in any number of permutations, where there's kind of a very charismatic, potentially dangerous or reckless character in a relationship. Now, I don't know how personally we want to get, but I'm curious if there are any among you who kind of felt like this was sort of a window in any way into something that you remembered or had lived. Now that could be anything. It doesn't have to be a relationship. It could be, maybe you were lucky enough to visit France when you were a teenager, and this tickled those kind of memories. But can I entice anyone to kind of give us a kind of personal reaction from which we can kind of develop a conversation here? Don't be shy.
I might just jump in while people are thinking to say that I was really glad to have the opportunity to revisit that short film, A Summer Dress, because I started my career at the same time that Monsieur Ozon was starting his career. And I remember watching those shorts as like a new programmer for film festivals and just being so struck by them and smitten with them and thinking like this was really somebody to keep an eye on. So
I'm glad you knew that work, Justine, because I think a lot of us don't have a chance to watch short films. And of course, it's a great place to kind of discover new talent. And Ozon had made a handful of shorts, but this one I think really is the one that sparked, the realization that we had a real talent here. And I think there are different reasons. It's obviously a very sexy movie, and that got attention. But I think that there's a quality that he shares with Almodovar and just a select handful of directors. I would also put Luca Guadagnino into that camp. How many of you were reminded of the movie Call Me By Your Name when watching this one? Since both are movies about young love, and there's an age difference, but there's also that sense of kind of an older, maybe more experienced or more powerful force in this dynamic, and how it comes to define the other one's kind of romantic history going forward. But what I think that those three directors, Ozon, Almodovar, and Guadagnino, have in common is a way that they can almost make you feel what you're watching. Did you sort of sense that when you were watching this film, where, of course, filmmakers have visual, sight and sound, visual and audio to work with. Those are the two tools. But sometimes if you have a really gifted director, they can almost make you can feel the sun on the skin of the characters, and it almost feels like it awakens your sense memory, or you can smell maybe what the suntan lotion or what the salt in the air smells like. And I really got that right away from the short when I saw it many years ago. And when I saw this feature, I thought, I see what he's doing. He's kind of bringing us back around to this place that he took us in A Summer Dress all those years ago. But as I'm talking about this, this was an unusual format. Did you guys get to see the short, A Summer Dress? Because if you haven't, please, I won't spoil it or anything, but it's available to rent for, I think, $3 on Apple, on their kind of store, and it's 15 minutes, and maybe the sexiest 15 minutes you'll experience this summer. So, but I won't focus too much on that, as it seems like that it can be the dessert you watch after this conversation, if you like. But it does have one thing in common with this movie, which I think is kind of one of the most memorable and outrageous scenes, is when Alex goes to the morgue to visit David's body, and he goes dressed as a woman. It's a preposterous disguise. How could it work on anyone? But if you're familiar with Ozon's film, his earlier film, you get a chuckle from that, because it's kind of a callback to something that happens along the same lines in that short. But so again, great, Justine. Of course, the great advantage of Telescope is if you're ever looking for foreign movies, it's the sort of shortcut between you and getting to watch it in whatever format is easiest for you. So let's see, how can, so I see a couple notes from people saying that, did everyone, however, get a chance to see Summer of '85? Who's here in the conversation? Good, good. Okay. Now, when you're watching kind of a movie like this, how does it make you feel? I think one thing that's kind of interesting about the moment we live in is, of course, this is very natural for teenagers to be discovering their sexuality. But these days, I think we watch it a little bit differently, right? Like we wonder, okay, we know the director's not 17 years old, and the way that he watches his characters is both partly memory, but it also fetishizes them. You know, did you all feel comfortable with the way that the relationship was depicted?
Yes, I felt comfortable. Yes, about how the relationship was described. What I thought it was interesting was go back to the 80s, where I see the whole family in denial, or they knew perfectly, the mom and the father, that Alexis was probably gay, or he had that kind of relationship, but there were all those mirrors, and nobody would say it, or nobody would acknowledge it. Even the mom, when she sees him dressed like when he comes back from the morgue, he's still dressed like a girl, and
right.
She doesn't acknowledge any of that. They were kind of trying not to. If we don't talk about it, it's not happening.
Yeah, she makes the reference to Uncle Jackie in that scene, right? And we all kind of understand it can still be true today, but certainly in another generation, how everyone probably knew someone gay, and a conservative family like that would have felt a lot of shame. And the last thing, and what she's doing in mentioning that is she's kind of socializing her son to sense her disapproval and how that's not acceptable within the family. So you see that it's quite clear to us as an audience what Alex's identity is.
Yes.
But you really see everyone kind of rejecting it. I'm curious how you read the other mother is played by Valerie Bruni Tedeschi, who's a terrific actress, but it's a very unusual performance. Do you think she's more aware or accepting of the relationship that she senses? There are ambiguities there, and I think it's really interesting. Maureen, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I find that I forgot his name, but not Alexis.
David is David. The other, yeah.
Right. That David's mother always seemed to make excuses for him. She was sort of, to my expression, she always blamed the loss of the father, and she was overly protective. He was 18 years old, but I felt that she was an enabler in certain ways, because she always saw her son as a victim, rather than finding himself in everything. She kind of had a very narrow vision of the situation, and I think she enabled her son. I considered him a predator, because at the beginning of the film, he really took his time to befriend Alex. He really took his time. And he was very manipulative, but it didn't happen right away. The sexual, that he wasn't aggressive, but he really had, it was kind of interesting how he wormed his way very slowly, very methodically to gain Alex's comfort and not to. I thought David was a real manipulator, and and everybody felt sorry for him because he lost his father. But I, saw him as a predator because he did it to the teacher. He did it with the. I got a feeling when he was trying to help that friend who was drunk. Remember, Alex was coming out of the club, and Alex was saying, "Well, just leave him alone, let him write it out." But when I found out later that David came home at 4 o'clock in the morning, he took clearly advantage of this drunk. He probably had, sex with him too, and taking advantage of his intoxication. And then the mother starts blaming Alex. You were supposed to be a friend, and you got him home at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, I just he was not very likable in my.
It's interesting. I like how the reading that you're giving is a moral one, and it's not moral about that they're gay or the things that seem to be judged in the movie, but rather the kind of aspect of predation or power dynamics, or there's a kind of pervers narcissist aspect, dimension of this kind of to the relationship. And one of the things that I think makes movies like this most effective, and I don't know how each of you felt, but we as an audience have to sort of be part of this seduction. It has to work on us too. And so when the ruse or the situation starts to crumble for Alex, we're kind of experiencing that same disillusionment. And I remember that scene that you're talking about where he's on the phone and learns that David was out until 4 the night before. We've just seen that Alex came home at a decent time in the scene just before. And there's a little part of us that sort of, feels the same jealousy and the same concern. And the more we learn about David, the more wary we are of him. Now, we're older and more experienced in our own lives than Alex is, and he's really mesmerized, I think, by this person. Would anyone like to jump in to add on? Lucille?
Yes, I have 10 more minutes to watch the movie. I just got started before our discussion.
Well, we can tell you one thing is how it ends because it starts with the ending, right? Which is already a kind of unusual device to. The name of the book is Dance on My Grave.
Oh, okay.
So I think everybody knows going into the story the fate of David, but go ahead. So with the caveat, we want to hear what you thought.
Yeah, I would like to ask everyone, how old was Alex? This is new to me. I don't watch these kinds of movies ever. C'est pas mon truc in French. So I have to say, I don't know how old anybody was in the movie. Was David maybe 17 and Alexis 13? Or
I think it's older. I think it's 17 for Alexi, and 18 for David, I believe. Am I remembering that right?
No, okay. Alexi was 16 and David was 18.
Was this Alexi's introduction to a homosexual lifestyle? Because he didn't look so shocked, but he kind of thought he was a nice guy for a long time. And so I wondered if he got taken in or had he already been taken in before. And if you say he was 16, what do you think?
I have some thoughts, but I wonder if anyone else would like to sort of give their theories before I go ahead, Jeanette.
Yes, I was going to say, I had the impression that this was his first love.
Okay.
In a way, it didn't matter so much whether it was his first sexual encounter in a way, although that was part of his fascination with David. But I really had the impression that this was the first time he had really fallen in love or thought he was really in love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of course we have Kate later on who explains, I think you fell in love with the image that you had of David, who you thought he was. And it's true. I didn't write it down at the time. And then afterwards, I couldn't remember exactly what the line was, but he does say something about, I found the friend I was looking for after he starts feeling really close to David. You know, she says something about, yeah, well, I already mentioned that, but it's true that he does his voiceover narration does make a comment along those lines. So my impression was that she was actually right, and that it was probably just the first time he'd ever been in love. You don't know what to expect. You don't know what it's supposed to be like, and you think of the other person maybe as the other half of your soul kind of thing, and that it's going to last forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think those are some really interesting observations. I agree with what you're saying. Someone was starting to speak. Go ahead, Lucille.
Yeah. So this could have been the first time for Alexis.
I think it's clear that I think there's a key scene early on that shows that he's kind of ready for something like this. And I'm not speaking to his sexual readiness or precociousness, but he's looking for a male interest. And he may not quite understand what it is that he's looking, but that's the scene where he goes and thinks that his friend is going to be able to go on the boat with him. And instead, the girlfriend shows up and they kiss right in front of him. And you can just see Alexei kind of die a little bit in that moment. You know, it's like whatever he was hoping was going to happen between him and that boy has crumbled because that boy has gone off with the girl. And I think that's key to the way that the movie's set up, so that when another candidate comes along, you know, who could be, it may not be a sexual partner that he has in mind, but another partner who somehow fills that thing that he seems to be looking for, a connection, let's say, you know, with another man. There's potential with David, because David, who doesn't necessarily define himself as gay, at least encourages, reciprocates, you know, and just, it starts out with that seemingly innocent but loaded question about, like, are we friends, right? You know, he's somehow extending through that line to Alexei. I think the thing that Alexei wants from another boy his age at that period in his life. That's the way I read that.
So David's been around the block quite a bit.
We know that he has,
and women, both bisexual.
It seems so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I do not agree with you. I think Alexis was very innocent, and his innocence was what led him to something he had never experienced before. I don't see Alexei as looking for anything like David was going to offer. But
that's
David
probably valid. Yeah.
Wove his way in. And then when, of course, the British girl shows up and he's out making out with her, I'm thinking, oh, how devastating for Alexei to see what he's seeing. And obviously David is just playing the field.
Yeah, I often think, you know, I'm gay myself, and I won't share too much of my history, but I can tell you this much. When I was coming out, it was really important to me to find someone else who was almost as new to this as I was. Because there are a lot of gay men, or you could say gay boys, depending on what time they're starting their experience, who are kind of initiated by someone older. It could be a lot of these are not romantic stories at all. You know, it can be something that's a relative who's taking advantage of a situation, or who knows what. And so, you know, I think there's something, when there's a certain proximity, there's something more romantic about that in my mind. I mean, this is true of heterosexual love as well. You know, a lot of young women are kind of initiated against their will, or maybe they're infatuated with someone who's older or more experienced, and, you know, they're pressured in a way. And I think, Lucille, what you're picking up on is this falls into that second category. Even though the ages are not so different, there is definitely an experience difference. And it seems to be part of the dynamic that the movie's exploring. Go ahead, Maureen.
There we go. Also, I noticed that part of David's manipulation, and I've had my own experience from his heterosexual experience, they buy people, bought him a helmet, bought him clothes. Obviously, you know what? It's very tempting.
The job, yeah, all of that.
You know, he's 16 years old. He's never had that experience. And he equates that with, oh, he really cares about me, you know, because he's buying me all these things. So I that kind of bothered me, you know, that this was his way to ingratiate himself to David, like associating that part. He's and I get a feeling Alexis came from a very strict upbringing, that they couldn't afford that kind of luxury, because Alexis always had the same clothes. David said, "How come you always wear the same clothes? Let's go buy you clothes." You know, it's just, you know, I find, oh my gosh, you know, this is another way to kind of have him more, you know, tie into that he really cares about me because he's taking care of me.
Yeah.
You know, and he's 16 years old. He's, like you say, he's a newbie. He's all new to this experience. Very interesting, in a very vulnerable situation. And David knew right off the bat that this, you know, he could entice him with the love, the buying, and all that, which kind of, you know, was very hard. And I thought, oh no, you know, there's one more thing for him to ensnare Alexis to do that. And all he really wanted, I thought, was friendship, because he was really nice to Kate, I think, you know, and when Alexis first met Kate, you know, all he really wanted was to have friends. He liked her, not from a sexual, but having her as a friend, which I thought was very interesting. So it showed, for me, it showed that it's something in Alexis' life that he missed, that he didn't have that many close friends. He liked Kate, but then, and she helped him. So it was sort of a discovery, I think, for him to see the other side of it, having both female friends. I think that was very important, the friendship of it.
But it does, do you think, I think his interactions with Kate, it seems that he's making clear, or she understands that he is gay. You know, when she approaches him, that's not the way she's flirtatious immediately, right? But later in the story, when she's helping him access the morgue and things like that, it seems like, you know, by that point, she's caught up to kind of what his, you know, identity is.
It was so touching, because she was a real friend. She said, "I'll do whatever it takes for you to see his body." And, you know, and I think that's what he needed. You know, you need true friends, and it doesn't always have to be sexual. You know, I myself have a lot of gay friends. I joined a gay community. I'm not gay, but, you know, they're people, you know, set aside the sexuality of it. You know, it's just, my best friends are gay, and you know, it just, you got to see them in the terms of as friendship, whether it's heterosexual or otherwise. You see them as people and not so much anything else. Human beings and people who care.
I'm curious, among the people participating here, are there other reactions? Because I think the ones that we're hearing here are valid, but I suspect that Ozon himself is a filmmaker who loved this book when he was young, and has described in interviews, he said that when he was young, he could identify more with Alex, and as he was older, he came to identify more with David. That may be something to do with now being older than the people he's interested in or something like that. I don't know. But if that were true, I wonder if other people have, I don't want to be judgmental about this, so charitable is probably not the right word, but like, a different reading on kind of the dynamic here that doesn't necessarily see it as quite so much a predator situation, because he does, I think, see this as an erotic story. Susan, you raised your hand.
Turn this off. Yeah, my feelings about David changed over the course of the movie, obviously.
Yeah,
One would expect that. I really didn't know where this was going, because when I read the little blurb before we started the movie, I thought this was going to be two young men finding love and on the sailboat, and that it would sort of develop from there. So I was pretty shocked is the wrong word, but I guess I agree with Maureen and some of the other people who have said I thought it was quite sinister what was going on at the beginning. And I really did feel like, Alexis I thought he kept saying, well, no, that's not really what I want to do. And then he did it, and well, let's go do this and let's go do that, or, come on, let's get out of here, or let's do this. And he kept saying, I don't really want to do that. But as he said later, he couldn't resist. And so I did feel, sinister is the word that comes to mind. I really thought that something really bad was going to happen and that David really was taking advantage of him. Now that changed, and I was maybe naively so, but I was really surprised, because all of a sudden they were in bed together. And then there were these, 6 weeks of pure joy. And I loved that part, and they looked like really, truly happy. And I didn't notice any of that. And, they were at the movies, they were on the boat, they talked, intimately. It was very, very sweet. And then the third part, I really did see it as, young love, like we've been saying. And that, if you see the whole thing in its entirety, as David said, and I appreciate what David said, I'm not ready to be like owned by anybody. I'm not ready to be committed. If I want to sleep with a woman, a girl, I can. If I want to sleep with you, I will. But, I see it as a bigger arc, and I really appreciated. I also appreciated that David had tears in his eyes when he was expressing this. So he really did have very sincere feelings for Alexis. And, in the greater scheme of things, it does become a, finding yourself love story. But there were definitely at the beginning parts that I thought were, very scary.
Yeah, and, or less than ideal, certainly.
Less than ideal, yeah.
Jeanette, I see you raising your hand. Go ahead. Oh, you just muted by accident, I think.
Okay.
Go for it.
Sorry about that. Yes, everyone's making such great comments. I have about 15 different things I want to say all at the same time or address. But I think one of the things that makes the film interesting is the fact that the figure of David is ambiguous. He's shown to be, there's ambiguity about his motives and what he's really like throughout the entire film, even just starting with him lying to his mother about spending that first night out till 4 a.m. and being with Alexei, right? Because that's when the mother, So, and then the boat that he supposedly was taking back and tying up at the dock of the friend that from the very, very beginning. I mean, they get into that fight, and Alexei gets hit in the mouth by his former friend, what I think is going to turn out to be his former friend, because the boat wasn't where it was supposed to be. So my immediate thought was, well, did David actually do that, or did he just leave it floating in the harbor? Did he do it on purpose so that the friend would be mad at him. And it's there all the way through. There are very small things, even like that, that make his character ambiguous. So that ambiguity, I hadn't seen the predation. I hadn't seen him as a predator nearly to the extent that Maureen has. And I enjoyed your remarks. I found them very insightful because I hadn't actually identified all the details that really made him seem like a predator. But in a way, I mean, I could also imagine this love story happening between Alexei, a slightly younger boy, and a female. The femme fatale, the classic femme fatale, right? She gets him to fall in love with her and then throws him over because she isn't satisfied with him. But you see a real fascination on Alexei's part with David, and with all these with this kind of risky behavior, like being on a motorcycle. And I forget what David says exactly about wanting to catch up to speed and odd things like that.
Lucille, go ahead.
Nobody thought about jailbait. That's all I could think of as soon as somebody mentioned he was 16. I thought, jailbait. This is a crime. And nobody bothered with that.
Well, I think now I'm not a legal scholar, but I know that some of the standards are different in France from in America, some of the ages. I think even in America, it has to do more with the difference in age. So it's not like if you have someone who's 1 month shy of being 18 and someone who's 1 month older than 18, it's, but I'm not sure how that goes. I think you are meant to be uncomfortable, but I don't think you're meant to be thinking of this as like a Roman Polanski situation either. And again, it seems to be very important to Ozon that this was a novel that he read in the 80s, when novels like this that were dealing with young gay characters were non-existent. It took Hollywood, I think maybe 5-6 years ago, they finally made a movie called Love, Simon, which is the first time a Hollywood studio ever made a film about two teenage boys in love with each other. And so I think for Ozon, it was kind of as a young man who was coming to terms with his own sexuality in the 80s, he responded to what he saw as, I would, putting words in his mouth, he saw as a positive depiction, in that it didn't, this is right, it's contemporaneous with the AIDS crisis, but it's not about that. It might have been a little early for it to even reflect that. There's a lot of stories in the 80s about gay characters where there's suicide or self-harm or, real hatred. And so I think even though there are the nuances that I have really appreciated you guys picking up on, I think that the general aspect is not meant for us to sort of be hung up on the age. And I don't think that we're necessarily meant to see Alexei as like jailbait or underage or inexperienced. He is, at 16, but I don't think this is not like a Lolita story, where a much older person is out looking for underage, people. I think it's much more akin to the dynamic that we saw in Call Me by Your Name, where that is literally in that movie an issue. There you have a grad student played by Armie Hammer and an underage boy, the son of the professor that he works for, played by Timothée Chalamet. And the age difference is a real thing there. And again, I think these two movies being made by gay men are meant to be stories of first love in a way that A Room with a View, where you have a young, inexperienced woman played by Helena Bonham Carter, attracted to a slightly older and, kind of more refined man. That's my take. But it is not to excuse whatever the legal restrictions might be, but I don't think it's the point of the story. Sometimes movies are specifically about that, about, the kind of legality of something or the crime aspect of it. That's my take.
Okay. Thank you.
I see a couple hands. I'll start with Jeanette and Maureen. I saw that you have also.
Yeah, I just had one more thing that I wanted to mention. When talking about, it's very interesting, your very first question about what we thought about the mother of Alexei and her mentioning Uncle Jackie, and that was a way to let him know that homosexuality wasn't acceptable in the family. I read that completely the opposite. Because one thing we haven't mentioned is the class difference.
It's important. I'm glad you brought it up.
It's very important because Alexei's father is a docker. He didn't own a store. He didn't have the money to own a store. So you've got this, and it's one of the problems for Alexei, and one of the reasons that he's looking for his ideal friend, because he's trying to figure out where he fits. He comes from a working class family where the parents don't speak too much. They don't really talk a lot. They don't really say what's important. And my impression of the mother was that she was letting him know that he was not the first person in that family that wasn't like everybody else and wasn't heterosexual, but that there was Uncle Jackie, and she liked Uncle Jackie because he asked her that question. I think that's what they end that scene on.
But doesn't she say something
Uncle Jackie, or you
like I thought for a second there you were like Uncle Jackie in kind of a horrified way. That's the way that I recall that. But because that's the scene where he comes back in the dress, right? And
I know this is earlier on. Oh, okay. And there is this scene about the dress.
When he comes back in the dress, she says, "Oh my God, I thought for a minute you'd be like Uncle Jackie," and he said, no, I was rehearsing a play or something like that,
Oh, okay. Because I also thought she said something to the effect of, you have to get out of that before your father gets home. So I read that as her being more concerned of
like more tolerant,
sheltering him from any yes, and trying to help him, not have that discussion with his father. And then that's also one of the reasons that he's so fascinated by this bourgeois kid who's able to offer him a helmet and give him a job, and seems
the Rolls Royce of bathtubs and all this stuff that seems out of his class range,
But who also knows Rimbaud and Verlaine and quotes a poem back to him. That's something that connects them. Because of course he likes to write, and I think he down deep would like to pursue a career perhaps as a writer, or at least pursue those studies. And for the first time he's actually met somebody that he can connect with on that level.
I'm glad you brought up the writing. I want to come back to that, but I don't want to skip over Maureen's thoughts, so I'll save my question. Go ahead.
No, I think Jeanette explained it perfectly, and rather than repeating myself, that it shows that the upbringing, how it's patriarchic family, where the men have, the women have to be, quiet, and not admit that they like a person. She liked, because he said, "Did you like Uncle Jackie?" And she said, yes. It was obvious that she liked him, but she had to keep it, not to make it so obvious, and not to make it so, not to admit to the family that she liked him as a person. And I thought that was very sad that you don't talk about it. But everything else Jeanette said, I agree with.
Well, before moving to the writing question, because we're on the subject of the mother character that Valerie Bruni Tedeschi plays, what the way she treats Alexei by, you know, undressing him and specifically kind of, you know, remarking on and paying attention to his genitals and things like that, based on the way that we've kind of been talking about these things about dynamics and age differences and whatever, did that not, you know, read as also a kind of not necessarily predatory, but inappropriate kind of thing? And it seems to signal that this family is a very untraditional one, or certainly different. Denise, go ahead.
Yes, I found that very shocking, actually. I thought she was flirting with him. I mean, it was totally inappropriate on the part of a mother to do that to a young boy.
And the way she keeps calling him by these kind of flirtatious nicknames and such,
yes,
you know.
she's definitely flirting with him, and I don't think it was, you know, appropriate at all. There's one thing that I'm embarrassed to say, but I saw the movie a while ago, and I cannot remember how David died. Can you enlighten me there a little bit? Remind me what happened. Did he commit suicide? Was it an accident?
No, it's an accident. He's like a speed junkie, right? And so he, but it seems to be in kind of he's in a colère. He's kind of, you know, upset and goes off, and in the midst of that, has a fatal accident. So it's a little hard to attribute blame in exactly the way that it's, you know, kind of being treated in the movie. And it's interesting that the mother then, you know, holds it against Alexei, even though one could say that that's something that comes out of David's reckless personality even. But he's not suicidal per se.
Okay.
Does that register?
Yes.
That kind of
okay.
The way
I wasn't sure. Actually, when I did see the movie, I wasn't sure exactly what happened. So
yeah.
Thank you for.
I do think the movie plays with ambiguity in some interesting ways, and that's where I wanted to take us back to the writing, because I think there is the question of whether everything that we are seeing is true. Is it as Alexei is sharing it? You know, he's being encouraged to kind of become a writer and to, you know, describe his experiences. I think that there's an element, without the movie being too coy about it, but it's introducing the idea of unreliability or romanticization. He could be embellishing things. Is that an element that interested or caught anybody when they were watching this? I tend to, as a writer myself, I tend to respond to stories where it kind of plays with that element, but I'm not sure what, if anything, in the story would be different if it were being told by God or the eye of God versus, you know, through the filter of a young writer.
Farid, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did, because to me, we're very focused on David and Alexei. Actually, what Peter just said, you know, it's written and told by Alexei. However, what I think is happening is that it's the mother of David who is very much responsible for this, because she knew that her son is not feeling well because he lost his father, and she wanted him to have a friend. I think she kind of knew what she was doing. I mean, that scene originally, I was like, why doing something like this? I mean, you know, it's a 16-year-old. Why would you, like, you know, take off his clothes? And Alexei is kind of like a baby who did not do anything, who kind of let her do, and looked at David for, like, you know, help me or something. So I think the mother was very manipulative, and it shows also at the end, because she was really not sensitive toward the pain of this child who didn't do anything. He was hurt, he was in love, And I think that all of this is just a mother. She was not sensitive from the beginning. She was focused on her own son and finding fun for her own son. And when this happened, she tried to blame it on this child. So I think the mother of David was playing a role behind all of this.
You know, as a film critic, often a lot of my reference points are to other movies as much as to anything I might have experienced in life. But there was a really beautiful film that played Cannes the year before this, the year after. Now it all blurs together, but it was probably the year after, close. And it's a Belgian film, French language, directed by Lucas Don. And it was submitted, and I think it was I'm pretty sure it was one of the 5 nominees for Best Foreign Language Film. And it's about 2 much younger boys who have an incredibly close friendship. It's not sexual, but it could maybe evolve to that in years down the road. We don't know. It's focused on a younger age. They have sleepovers, and we sense that maybe one of them is definitely gay without it ever being, you know, necessarily confirmed, and the other one may or may not, you know, and they're teased at school because of their closeness. You know, I put that in quotes because that's the title of the movie, and I think the movie is kind of talking about how when these friendships exist between young men, boys, society isn't comfortable with that and starts to call them names on the playground, and starts to bully and starts to, you know, assert how they expect, what kind of masculine behavior they expect. And the movie, this is, you know, treated as a surprise in the movie, but I'm bringing it up here because it's relevant. One of the boys commits suicide, and it's so different how the movie treats it there, because to me, suicide, I hate when suicide is a device, like a dramatic device in movies. It's too easy. It's, you know, like, I don't think that's what's going on here, but there's an element where it obviously affects the plot in a big way. But because suicide is such a cruel thing, you know, we all, thank you, Justine, pointed us to close and where you can see it on Telescope. But it leaves questions, guilt, you know, so like it leaves a vacuum without explanations. And I think that is happening here. It's happening to Alexis, it's happening to the mother. You know, everyone wants a scapegoat, an explanation. This may not even really be a clear case of suicide, although there's clearly depression and other emotions mixed into it. And I think, you know, Close, I don't like the way that the movie treats suicide as a surprise, but I love everything else about the movie, what it makes you think about, you know, cultural norms and social judgment, and especially the wonderful Belgian actress Émilie Dequesne, who was in Rosetta all those years ago, the Dardenne brothers film Rosetta. She won Best Actress at Cannes, and here she's, it's funny to see someone we met as a teenager on screen playing a mother, but the way that she seems to understand, as the mother of the dead child, what the other son, the other boy is going through. I mean, it's, you know, I say I don't cry in movies because something sad happens. I cry when I see human kindness expressed in a kind of spontaneous way. This is the kind of movie that gives you that. And, you know, it's a movie that isn't about sexuality, but is, if you responded to some of the kind of dynamics in this movie, you might appreciate seeing. There's also an American movie that came out 2 years ago called, I love the title of this, it's based on a book set in the 80s, around the same time, called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And Ari and Dante are the names of 2 teenage boys growing up in Texas. And, you know, they have a kind of, you know, it's the first book in a series, the same way that Dance on My Grave is also. So, you know, and a movie was made of that. And again, you have the awareness a closeted or discovering himself young gay boy whose parents know that an aunt is a lesbian, and the way that, you know, that character is kind of referred to reminded me a little bit here. But I guess we are reaching the end of our time. I want to make sure of a couple things. One is that you're reminded of the short film. I do think the short film shows how Ozon is returning to certain themes over the course of his career, and you'll also see a more experienced character kind of pressuring a less experienced character, not in a criminal way, but in a way that you know, clearly is maybe beyond the expectation of one of them. But it's just a really delightful thing. It is racier than this, and if this was outside of your comfort zone, then I wouldn't necessarily suggest it. But you know, if you like the kind of the sexual tension of this and the playfulness aspect, and if you want to see kind of what the dressing up in a summer dress scene pays off, take a moment to watch that short. And then please join us next month. We'll be watching a Belgian film, French language, that very, very different, but I think really one of the exceptional movies of the last few years. In French, the title was Un Monde, Playground in English. You can find where to view it on Telescope again. And this is a super short but very potent film, told basically from the eye level of a young girl going to school for the first time and seeing her older brother bullied. And because we'll be talking about this in September, kind of with the new school year, we thought this would be an appropriate time to kind of look at a movie that's dealing with school and school bullies and such. I think it's a really powerful film. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for sharing. I so appreciate, I think as a film critic, I get to monologue all the time in my job. Getting to hear other people's reactions to films in this context is really special. I hope you'll come back next month and join us to talk about that.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you also to Renee Ketchum, Melissa Sora, and Isabelle Leroux with Alliance Française. And thank you to everyone here for joining us today for such a thoughtful discussion. When Peter asked earlier if people had seen other films by François Ozon, it seemed that not many people have. If you liked this film, you are in for a treat because he is a prolific director. I put a link to all of his films that are currently streaming in the chat. As Peter mentioned, let's see, next month's French Cinémathèque will be discussing Playground. That'll take place on September 23rd. We'll be sending out more information about that soon, and we look forward to seeing you in September. So thanks again, and see you soon.